Welcome, friends, to ULTDC. Today we will have a talk on contemplation and meditation. After we visit the Declaration of ULT, our devotional reading, and the three fundamentals of theosophy. At 12:05 or thereabouts, we will begin our study on light on the path. The Declaration.
Shall we read it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it to time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of theosophy and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all.
Thank you. Our devotional reading is from the Voice of the Silence, starting on page 15. Help nature and work on with her, and nature will regard thee as one of her creators and make obeisance. And she will open wide before thee the portals of her secret chambers. Lay bare before thy gaze the treasures hidden in the very depths of her pure virgin bosom. Unsullied by the hand of matter, she shows her treasures only to the eye of spirit, the eye which never closes, the eye for which there is no veil in all her kingdoms. Then will she show thee the means and the way, the first gate and the second, the third up to the very seventh, and then the goal, beyond which lie bathed in the sunlight of the Spirit, glories untold, unseen by any save the eye of soul. There is but one path, road path, to the very end. Alone the voice of the silence can be heard. The ladder by which the candidate ascends is forms of wrongs, of suffering and pain. These can be solaced only by the voice of virtue. Woe then to thee, disciple, if there is one single vice thou hast not left behind, for then the ladder will give way and overthrow thee. Its foot rests in the deep mire of the sins and failings, and ere thou canst attempt to cross the wide abyss better, thou hast to leave thy feet in waters of renunciation. Beware lest thou shouldest set a foot soil upon the ladder's lowest rung. Woe unto him who dares pollute one rung with miry feet. That the foul and vicious mud will become tenacious. Then move thy feet unto the spot. And like a bird caught in the wily fowler's lime, he will be stayed from further progress. His vices will take shape and drag him down. His sins will raise their voices like as the jackals laugh and sob after the sun goes down. His thoughts become an army and bear him off a captive slave. Our fundamental propositions, starting on page 14, there are three of them, but they're all act as one. The first fundamental is on deity, the unity of all existence, the rootless root of all that was, that is, or ever shall be. It extends to beyond the range of human comprehension and can only be dwarfed by any human expression. It is beingness rather than being, and is thought of as the great breath, the one reality. It is the dynamic energy that might be linked to that small voice that wells up within each individual soul. That consciousness that should be our guide. Spirit, matter, soul, life, embodied and unembodied. What people generally call God or deity is an aspect of life. The omnipresent principle which invisibly functions in the atom as in the cosmos, and which abides as the self in the heart of every creature. As another aspect of life is law. People speak of the laws of God, the laws of nature, but it would be more accurate to speak of God as law. God, life, self are not different from law. They are law, the spirit of the universe. Also surrounds and is within all. As eternal pilgrims, we have the opportunity to become gods, as one with the absolute through sustained effort. We honor the gods as superior beings to emulate, but not as beings outside of ourselves. The second fundamental is on the law, that brings an analogy between the processes of nature and cosmos, and in the individual man as well. Day and night, life and death, sleeping and waking, karma and reincarnation. Men's law principles disintegrate in time. Nature uses them again with various principles, with various imprints from the past uses to form new human principles. The same process takes place in disintegration and formation worlds. There is the perpetual exchange of atoms, correlating and changing their combined equivalents, like the perfect flower, dying in order to grow into a perfect root. Man himself punishes and rewards based on his deeds. As above, so it is below. The third fundamental is on evolution. The whole order of nature is progressively marching toward a higher life in the cycle of incarnation of necessity. No spiritual Buddhi or divine soul can have an independent conscious existence before the spark which its essence has passed through every elemental form and has acquired individuality, first by natural impulse up to the human stage, and then by self-induced and self-devised efforts, checked by karma, from the mineral and plant to the animal and the human, up to the holiest archangel or Dhyani Buddha. Each entity must have won for itself the right to become divine through self-experience. The physical evolves gradually from the spiritual, mental, and psychic. Elementals are all future men. No one has ever reached adeptship in one embodiment. Each man has within himself the spark of a perfect being, and can evolve into an adept through self-induced and self-devised methods, aided by wisdoms of wisdom to the extent allowed by karma. So our talk today is on contemplation and meditation.
Friends, I'm gonna share my screen. Make it a slide. Hey friends, can you see the titles?
Yes.
Okay, great. Contemplation and meditation. The ideals of contemplation and meditation were present in Eastern religious traditions for centuries, and through translations of works like the Bhagavad-Gita, the Upanishads, the Vedas, and the Yoga aphorisms of Patanjali, these ideals came to the West, where they aroused great interest. H.P. Blavatsky, William Q. Judge, and Robert Crosby contributed significantly to the exploration of these ideals through their own writings, translations, and explanations, not only within the theosophical community, but throughout the wider world. In Judge's article on meditation and concentration, concentration, will, he proposes to divide meditation into two sorts. The first kind of meditation is the meditation practiced at a set or occasional time, and this is more like what we'd call contemplation, where one sets aside some time to think deeply about a decision or topic. This kind of contemplation is just good mental practice, and as one practices, one gets better at it. A calm and reflecting mind makes better decisions and always aids a person in daily life. Calm contemplation on universal themes helps one to reach inner stillness, and this in turn allows the consciousness and mind to expand. If continued, contemplation can be transformed into meditation, and meditation properly practiced is truly transformative, in that it is a means to access higher knowledge and to connect with the divine spirit within. By quieting the mind repeatedly and focusing on universal concepts, one can make one's mind more porous to the influences of the spirit within. The pathway and practice become strengthened, and then by living in this manner, one can translate these truths into action. The Bhagavad-Gita, in the chapter on the self-governed sage, says that the man whose heart and mind are not at rest is without wisdom or the power of contemplation. Who doth not practice reflection hath no calm. And how can a man without calm obtain happiness? What this passage tells us is that there's a direct connection between inner calmness, reflection, contemplation, and the ability to experience clarity, wisdom, and happiness. True happiness will remain elusive if one's mind is in a constant state of unrest. A calm and reflective mind is essential for the attainment of wisdom. A restless heart and a restless mind signify that there is inner turmoil, anxiety, or a lack of peace within. If inner turmoil can be seen as an active rajasic state full of heat and motion, reflection and contemplation are sattvic, cool, compassionate, and detached. Think of a still lake perfectly reflecting its surroundings. If reflection and contemplation are necessary to make calm and insightful connections and to produce an understanding of the components of our experiences, then without reflection and contemplation, wisdom cannot blossom. A restless state of mind hinders intellectual and reflective capacities, and those parts of the brain involved in thought and reflection, like the frontal cortex, actually switch off, shunting energy to the restless and rajasic emotional limbic system. Compare some of the capabilities of the limbic system with those of the frontal cortex. Freeze, fight, or flight with reasoning, comprehension, problem solving, impulse control, creativity, and perseverance. The ability to make sound judgments and decisions results from deep thought and calm reflection. Furthermore, they involve introspection, questioning, and thoughtful consideration of your experience. Without this practice, how will one be able to gather the fruit of experience? Contemplation leads us to clarity, wisdom, and happiness. Reflection and contemplation need to be a deliberate and conscious effort to gain insight, to learn from past experience, and to make sense of the world. The foundation is self-awareness. It's about being conscious of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. One component of this is critical thinking and involves analyzing and evaluating the information, experiences, and ideas, where one considers the significance and implication of the events in one's life. Open-mindedness is another component, meaning we should be willing to consider different perspectives, challenge our assumptions, and be receptive to new ideas. Contemplation and reflection can involve asking oneself questions, which can vary on the context but aim to encourage deeper thinking. For example, what did I learn from this experience? What worked well? What could be improved? What would I do differently in a similar situation? Reflection is not only about looking back, but also about looking forward, in that setting goals based on one's contemplations can guide our future actions. It's being proactive, not passive. Contemplation and meditation also often require time and patience. It should not be a rushed process. Taking the time to reflect allows for a thorough examination of experience and promotes a deeper understanding of ourselves and our surroundings. They become the most effective when they become part of a routine, and integrating moments of reflection into daily life helps build a habit of mindful thinking and contributes to spiritual growth. But what happens when one first begins this practice? Mr. Judge says that by reason of a peculiarity of the human mind, the associative part of memory is awakened the very instant contemplation is attempted. It is this that makes students weary and at last drives them away from the pursuit. A person sits down to concentrate on the highest idea he can formulate, and like a flash, troops of recollections of all sorts, including old thoughts and impressions, come before his mind, driving away the contemplation he first attempted, and concentration is at an end. This trouble is not unique. It happens to all and can only be corrected by practice, by assiduity, and by continuance. No strange and complicated directions are needed. All we must do is to try and keep on trying. The second sort of meditation Judge refers to is the meditation of an entire lifetime. This represents a single thread of intention and desire running through many years. The mysterious, subtle thread of a life's meditation is that which is practiced every hour by every one of us, by the philosopher, the mystic, saint, criminal, artist, and merchant. It is pursued in respect to that on which the heart is set. If the line of the life's meditation is fixed low, the results flowing from it will be related to the low level on which it was begun. Semi-occasional meditations will give precisely semi-occasional results in the long string of recurring bursts. But what of the other sort? A deep and constant practice of a power that has been made a possession through repetition and concentration. If the line of the life's meditation is fixed high and practice is regular, Then the results flowing from it will be related to the high level on which it was maintained, and the results will give precisely the deep and consistent results in the long string of recurring births. Concentration involves the will, and the subject of the will has not been treated of much in theosophical works. Patanjali, whose treatise on meditation is widely renowned as a manual of meditation, does not really go into it at all, though it seems to be inferred by him through his aphorisms. But we can say that will is universal and belongs not only to man and animals, but also to every other natural kingdom. The good and bad man alike have will, the child and the aged, the wise and the lunatic. It is therefore a power devoid in itself of moral quality. That quality must be added by man. Will acts according to desire, or as the older thinkers used to put it, behind will stands desire. This is why the savage, the child, the lunatic, and the wicked man often exhibit a stronger will than others, either because the desires have been intensified, and with that the will, or there are fewer desires, and all of the will force is drawn into these. So to make our will strong, we must have fewer desires. Judge says, let those be high, pure, and altruistic, for they will give us a strong will. No one can develop the will per se, because it exists forever, fully developed in itself. But practice can develop in us the power to call on that will, which is ours. Will and desire lie at the doors of contemplation and meditation. If we desire truth with the same intensity that we formerly wished for success, money, or gratification, we will speedily acquire meditation and possess concentration. If we do all of our acts, small and great, every moment for the sake of the whole human race, as representing the Supreme Self, then every cell and fiber of the body and inner man will be turned in one direction, resulting in perfect concentration. This is expressed in the New Testament in the statement that if the eye is single, the whole body will be full of light. And in the Bhagavad-Gita, it is still more clearly and comprehensively given through the different chapters. In one, it is beautifully put as the lighting up in us of the Supreme One, who then becomes visible. Let us meditate on that which is in us as the highest self. Concentrate upon it and will to work for it as dwelling in every human heart. The self is held to be that designated in the Indian books as Ishvara, which is a portion of the eternal spirit enshrined in the human body. The Bhagavad-Gita in chapter 15 says that an eternal portion of this spirit, having assumed life in this world, attracts the heart and the five senses which belong to nature. This spirit, Ishvara, approaches the objects of sense by presiding over the eye, the ear, the touch, the taste, and the smell, and also over the heart. And in an earlier chapter, it says, the Supreme Spirit within this body is called the spectator, the admonisher, sustainer, enjoyer, great Lord, and also highest soul. And again, the supreme eternal soul, even when existing within or connected with the body, is not polluted by the actions of the body. Elsewhere in these books, the same spirit is called the self. And as in a celebrated sentence, which in Sanskrit is Atmanam Atmana Pashya, meaning raise the self by the self. And all through the Upanishads, where the self is constantly spoken of, it is the same as the Ishvara of the Bhagavad-Gita. It therefore follows that such a thing as culture of this self through contemplation and meditation, which in its very nature is eternal, unchangeable, and unpollutable by any action, is such that shall enable us while on earth to mirror forth the wisdom and fulfill the behests of the self within, which is all wise and all good. In this process, there are three essential things to consider: the instrument, the act, and the agent, as well as the incitement to action, or knowledge itself, the thing to be known or done, and the person who knows. The study of this has been called yoga, or union, meaning a union with the Supreme Self, or the object of spiritual knowledge, which is the Supreme Self. Judge clarifies that there are two great divisions of yoga found in the ancient books, and they are called Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga. Hatha Yoga is a practical mortification of the body, by means of which certain powers can be developed. It consists in the assumption of certain postures and certain kinds of breathing that bring on changes in the body. It's referred to in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita as, some devotees sacrifice the sense of hearing and the other senses in the fire of restraint. Some offer objects of sense, such as sound, in the fires of the senses. Some also sacrifice inspiration of breath in expiration, and expiration in inspiration, by blocking up the channels of inspiration and expiration, desirous of retaining their breath. Others, by abstaining from food, sacrifice life in their life. In various treatises, these methods are set forth in detail, and there is no doubt at all that by pursuing them one can gain possession of sundry abnormal powers. There is a risk, however, especially in the case of people in the West where experienced gurus or teachers of these things are not found. These risks consist in that while an undirected person is doing these acts according to the rules of Hatha Yoga, he arouses about him influences that are harmful. And he also carries his natural functions to certain states now and then when he ought to stop for a while. But having no knowledge of the matter, he may go on beyond that and produce injurious effects. Then again, Hatha Yoga is a difficult thing to pursue, and one that must be pushed to the point of mastery and success. Few of our Western people are by nature fitted for such continuous and difficult labor on the mental and astral planes. Thus, being attracted to Hatha Yoga by the novelty of it and by the apparent pay that it offers in visible physical results, earnest people begin without knowledge of the difficulty, and stopping after a period of trial, they bring down upon themselves consequences that are wholly undesirable. The greatest objection to it, however, is that it pertains to the material and semi-material man only. Roughly speaking, to the body, and what is gained through it is lost at death. The Bhagavad-Gita refers to this and describes what happens in these words. All of these, indeed, being versed in sacrifice, have their sins destroyed by these sacrifices. But he alone reaches union with the Supreme Being, who eats of the ambrosia left from a sacrifice. This means that the Hatha Yoga practice represents the mere sacrifice itself, whereas the other kind is the ambrosia arising from the sacrifice, or the perfection of spiritual cultivation, and that leads to nirvana. The means for attaining the perfection of spiritual cultivation are found in the other sort of yoga, Raja Yoga. When concentration is perfected, we are in a position to use the knowledge that is ever within reach, but ordinarily eludes us. That which is usually called knowledge is only an intellectual comprehension of the outside visible forms assumed by certain realities. Passing from inanimate objects to the men and women about us, this ordinary intellectual knowledge aids us no more than before. Below the outer phenomena, our everyday intellect will not carry us. This man, we suppose, to have a certain character, but none of us is ready to say that we know him either in his good or his bad qualities. We know there is more to him than we can see or reason about. And when we turn to contemplate ourselves, we are just as ignorant as we are about our fellow man. Out of this has arisen an old saying, every man knows what he is, but no one knows what he will be. There is in us the power of discernment, the cultivation of which will enable us to know whatever is desired to be known. That there is such a power is affirmed by teachers of occultism, and the way to acquire it is by cultivating concentration in contemplation and meditation. It is generally overlooked that the inner man in each of us is actually who has these powers. And by inner man, Mr. Judge does not refer to the higher self, the Ishwara before spoken of, but that part of us which is called soul or astral man. All these terms are subject to correction and should not be held rigidly to the meanings given by various writers. Let us premise first the body now, visible, second, the inner man, not the spirit, and third, the spirit itself. Now, while it's quite true that the second or inner man has latent all the powers and peculiarities ascribed to the astral body, it's equally true that those powers are in the generality of people still latent or only very partially developed. This inner being is, so to say, inextricably entangled in the body, cell for cell and fiber for fiber. He exists in the body somewhat in the way the fiber of the mango fruit exists in the mango. The inner being of which we are speaking cannot do much when away from the physical body and is always influenced by it. It is not therefore easy to leave the body at will and roam about in the astral double. The stories we hear of this as being so easily done may be put down to strong imagination, vanity, or other causes. One great cause for error in respect to these astral doubles is that a clairvoyant is quite likely to mistake a mere picture of the person's thought for the person himself. In fact, among occultists who know the truth, the stepping out of the body at will and moving about the world is regarded as a most difficult feat, and for the reasons above hinted at. Inasmuch as the person is so interwoven with his body, it is absolutely necessary, before he can take his astral form apart from the body, he must learn to first carefully extract it, fiber by fiber, from the surrounding blood, bones, bile, skin, and flesh. It is neither easy nor quick to accomplish, nor done in one operation. It has to be the result of years of careful training, and it cannot be consciously done until the inner man has developed and cohered into something more than the irresponsible feelings and desires. This development and coherence are gained by perfecting the power of concentration in contemplation and meditation. Nor is it true, as the matter has been presented, by experiment in teaching, that even in our sleep we go rushing about the country, seeing our friends or enemies, or tasting earthly joys at distant points in the astral inner man. In all cases where the man has acquired some amount of concentration, it is quite possible that the sleeping body is deserted altogether, but such cases are as yet not in the majority. In most of us, the astral body remains quite close to our slumbering physical form. It's not necessary for us to go away in order to experience the different states of consciousness, which is the privilege of every man. But we do not go away over miles of country until we're able to, and we cannot be able until the necessary ethereal body has been acquired and we have learned how to use its powers. Now, this ethereal body has its own organs, which are the essence or real basis of the senses in the physical body. The outer eye is only the instrument by which the real power of sight experiences that which relates to sight. The ear has its inner master, the power of hearing, and so on with every organ. These real powers within flow from the spirit to which we referred at the beginning of this talk. And that spirit approaches the objects of sense by presiding over the different organs of sense. And whenever it withdraws itself, the organs cannot be used. And when a sleepwalker moves about with eyes open but do not see anything, although the objects are there and the different parts of the eye are working perfectly normally, this is an explanation of how the inner sight works apart from the outer. Ordinarily, there is no demarcation to be observed between these inner organs and the outer. The inner ear is found to be too closely interknit with the outer to be distinguished apart. But when concentration has begun, the different inner organs begin to awake, as it were, and to separate themselves from the chains of their bodily counterparts. Thus, the man begins to duplicate his powers. His bodily organs are not injured, but remain for use upon the plane to which they belong. And thereby he is acquiring another set which he can use apart from the others on the plane of nature which belong peculiarly to them. We find here and there cases where certain parts of this inner body have been by some means developed beyond the rest. Sometimes the inner head alone is developed, and we have one who can see or hear clairvoyantly or clairaudiently. Again, only a hand is developed apart from the rest, all the other inner senses being nebulous and wavering. It might be a right hand, and it will enable the owner to have certain experiences that belong to the plane of nature to which the right hand belongs, say the positive side of touch and feeling. But in these abnormal cases, there are always wanting the results of contemplation and meditation. They have merely protruded one portion, just as a lobster's eye is protruded on the end of the structure which carries it. Or take one, for example, who has thus curiously developed one of the inner eyes, say the left. This has a relation to the plane of nature quite different from that appertaining to the hand, and the results and experience are just as diverse. He will be a clairvoyant of a certain order, only able to recognize that which relates to his one-sided development, and completely ignorant of many other qualities inherent in the things seen or felt, because the proper organs needed to perceive them have had no development. He will be like a two-dimensional being who cannot possibly know that which three-dimensional beings know. In the course of the growth of this ethereal body, several things are to be observed. In one, this ethereal body has a cloudy, wavering appearance, with certain centers of energy caused by the incipiency of organs that correspond to the brain, heart, lungs, spleen, liver, and so on. It follows the same course of development as a solar system, and is in fact governed and influenced by the very solar system to which the world belongs, on which the being may be incarnate. With us it is governed by our own solar orb, the sun. If the practice of concentration be kept up, this cloudy mass begins to gain coherence and to shape itself into a body with different organs. As they grow, they must be used. Essays, trials, and experiments are to be made with them. In fact, just as a child must crawl before it can walk, and must learn walking before it can run, so this ethereal man must do the same. But as the child can see and hear much farther than it can crawl and walk, so this being usually begins to see and to hear before it can leave the vicinity of the body on any lengthy journey. Certain hindrances then begin to manifest themselves, which, when properly understood, will give us substantial reasons for the practicing of the virtues enjoined in the holy books and naturally included under the term of universal brotherhood. One is that sometimes it is seen that this nebulous forming body is violently shaken or pulled apart or burst into fragments that at once have a tendency to fly back into the body and take on the same entanglement that we first noticed. This is caused by anger, and this is why the sages all dwell upon the need of calmness. When the student allows anger to arise, the influence of it is at once felt by the ethereal body and manifests itself in an uncontrollable trembling, which begins at the center and violently pulls apart the hitherto coherent particles. If allowed to go on, it will disintegrate the whole mass, which will then reassume its natural place in the body. The effect following this is that a long time has to elapse before the ethereal body can be again created. And each time this happens, the result is the same. Nor does it make any difference what the cause for anger may be. There is no such thing as having what is called righteous anger in this study and escaping these inevitable consequences. Whether your rights have been unjustly and flagrantly invaded or not does not matter. The anger is a force that will work itself out in its appointed way. Therefore, anger must be strictly avoided, and it cannot be avoided unless charity and love, absolute tolerance, is cultivated. But anger may be absent and still yet another thing happen. The ethereal form may have assumed quite a coherence and definiteness, but it is observed that instead of being pure and clear and fresh, it begins to take on a cloudy and disagreeable color, the precursor of putrefaction, which invades every part and by its effects precludes any further progress, and at last reacts upon the student so that anger again manifests itself. This is the effect of envy. Envy is not a mere trifle that produces no physical result. It has a powerful action, as strong in its own field as that of anger. It not only hinders the further development, but attracts to the student's vicinity thousands of malevolent beings of all classes that precipitate themselves upon him and wake up or bring on every evil passion. Envy, therefore, must be extirpated, and it cannot be got rid of as long as the personal idea is allowed to remain in us. Another effect is produced on this ethereal body by vanity. Vanity represents the great illusion of nature. It brings up before the soul all sorts of erroneous or evil pictures, or both, and drags the judgment so far away that once more anger or envy will enter, or such course be pursued that violent destruction by outside causes falls upon the being. As in one case related to Mr. Judge, the man had made considerable progress, but at last allowed vanity to rule. This was followed by the presentation to his inner sight of most extraordinary images and ideas, which in their turn so affected him that he attracted to his sphere hordes of elementals seldom known to students and quite indescribable in English. These at last, as is their nature, laid siege to him, and one day produced all about the plane of his astral body an effect similar, in some respects, to that which follows an explosion of the most powerful kind known. The consequence was his ethereal form was so suddenly fractured that by repercussion the whole nature of the man was altered, and he soon died in a madhouse after having committed the most awful excesses. Vanity cannot be avoided except by studiously cultivating that selflessness and poverty of heart advised as well as by Jesus of Nazareth as by the Buddha. Another hindrance is fear. This is not, however, the worst of all, and is one that will disappear by means of knowledge, for fear is always the son of ignorance. Its effect upon the ethereal form is to shrivel it up, or coagulate and contract it. But as knowledge increases, that contraction abates, permitting the person to expand. Fear is the same thing as frigidity on the earth, and always proceeds by the process of freezing. Success in the culture of concentration for contemplation and meditation is not for him who sporadically attempts it. It is a thing that flows from a firm position assumed with regard to the end in view and unremittingly kept up. A complete knowledge of all that was ever written upon concentration will confer no power in the practice of it. The true practice is called Raja Yoga. And it discards those physical motions, postures, and recipes of the Hatha Yoga tradition relating solely to the present personality and directs the student to virtue and altruism as the bases from which to start. This is more often rejected than accepted, but let the seeker know once and for all that the virtues cannot be discarded nor ignored. They must be made part of our life, and their philosophical basis must be understood. But it may be asked if we will succeed alone by the practice of virtue. The answer is no, not in this life, but perhaps one day in a later life. The life of virtue accumulates much merit. That merit will at some time cause one to be born in a wise family where the real practice of concentration may perchance begin. Or it may cause one to be born in a family of devotees, or those far advanced on the path, as said in the Bhagavad-Gita. But such a birth as this, says Krishna, is difficult to obtain. Hence, the virtues alone will not always lead in short space to our object. We must make up our minds to a life of constant work upon this line. Immense fields of investigation and experiment have to be traversed. Dangers unthought of and forces unknown are to be met, and all must be overcome. The only way in which we can gain the will and the power to thus seize and hold the power of contemplation and meditation is by acquiring the virtues on the one hand and by understanding ourselves on the other. Someday we will begin to see why not one passing thought may be ignored, not one flitting impression missed. This is no simple task, it's a gigantic work. Reflect upon the thought and the passing sight of a picture or a single word instantly lost in the rush of the world. It may be the basis for a dream that will react upon the brain the next day. So the capacity for each to be able to examine each thought must be made. If you have noticed it, then when you awake the next day, you have to go back through your memory over every word and circumstance of the preceding day, seeking like an astronomer for the stray thought in a galaxy of thoughts. And similarly, you must learn to be able to go thus backwards into your days and go over carefully in detail all that happened and all that you permitted to pass through your brain. And this is no easy matter. As we have to deal with the mind, all unused as it is to these things and overburdened with false training, we must begin where we are. We must examine our present conditions and grow to know our own present powers and mental machinery. This can be done through contemplation and meditation. And once it is done, we may proceed to see ourselves in the way that shall bring about the best result. And that concludes the talk on contemplation and meditation. And now we'll open it up to comments and questions.
Thank you, Kathy. Sorry, go ahead, Herb.
I was just thinking about the yogas that you mentioned, Raja and Hatha being physical. It's you already physical body is already established pretty well. It seems like the other the Raja is Hatha is more in tune with the maybe the astral body, and the astral is under development more than the physical. So it seems like that would be an argument for that too. Hatha is it said that you have to be much more in tune with much more, very very experienced at it for it to be very effective.
Yeah, it seems like it's a very difficult path, as Mr. Judge says. And, without the knowledge of a truly experienced guide who could see on the astral plane, there might occur very one-sided development, which creates some abnormal powers or some psychic propensities, but can also attract really harmful or injurious elementals or outcomes. So it's really not worth it. Plus, whatever is gained from it doesn't pertain to the permanent reincarnating ego, so it dies with the body and the brain. And that effort essentially, no effort is lost or wasted, but it doesn't become a permanent part of the reincarnating ego and its, education or the drawing of the personal into the Supreme Spirit. Because only that which is of the highest, that can, pertain to the highest planes, goes across the Antaskarana bridge and becomes made a permanent part of the reincarnating ego. Everything else dies with the body, the brain, the personality. The Raja Yoga is more just the practice, as was said, of the virtues, but also with a goal of understanding who we really are. And it does seem that there, at an advanced stage, is also the development of powers within the astral body, which is important for us to know. I it's not talked about anywhere else, but without a knowledge or some preliminary understanding of it, like Mr. Judge gave in this article on the culture of concentration, one might be frightened or not understand what's going on. But those effects seem to be for the more advanced practitioner of Raja Yoga. And as he said, it takes, lifetimes of practice. And the virtues are a solid part of it, so that the goal, the end that we're working towards, union with the Supreme and understanding that all beings are portion of that one life, and practicing the virtues, that's the only sure way to get us to the goal. It's also a difficult path, but we have to take more than a one life view for this education.
We when we sit to try to meditate, and I say try to meditate because that is you want to understand it the way you said it too. That's the culmination of concentration, contemplation, and meditation. So concentration, contemplation, meditation. That's the third thing you are able to do. But when I first started to try to meditate, two minutes would be a very long time. And we're supposed to get to a point through this process that you laid out, that we can do that basically 24 hours a day. And that's a goal that we need to keep in mind. We have to concentrate. We have to do this lifetime after lifetime after lifetime to get perfect at it. To get perfect at anything takes many lives. So we shouldn't get discouraged.
Yeah, it is easy to get discouraged. Like he said, often drives students away. So knowing that we should not get discouraged, and he said no special instructions are really required, just to try and to keep trying. But some of the guidance on, thinking and reflecting, it seems is useful, like, asking oneself questions deliberately, going over the day. Those are all good practices that help prepare for meditation. So there are things we can do, practicing calmness, being open-minded, evaluating information, analyzing, without overdoing it, but just in relation to either the events in our life that happen during our day, or he also recommends, and I should have mentioned this, taking a devotional book like The Voice of the Silence or the Bhagavad-Gita or the Dhammapada or the Tao Te King or something that speaks to one, and doing it in regard to some passage or chapter that speaks to you is also a good practice.
So Kathy, a common term that's used, in workplaces and maybe in schools is called mindfulness, right? And how can someone who's not initiated to theosophy or any of the scriptures, how can they use mindfulness as a stepping stone towards attaining a meditative state?
I think the way the word mindfulness is used in those contexts is like how we're describing contemplation. And someone who doesn't have a knowledge of theosophy or is aware of the inner man, I guess could run into trouble, but it's such a difficult thing to quiet the mind. We might spend a lifetime being mindful and just begin to start calming the mind. It just seems like it's I think the mindfulness thing is probably a good thing. And, if kids can practice it in school, it might help, a whole generation be more mindful of their choices or their thoughts. And it could help bring humanity forward, it seems. Are those what you were thinking as well?
Yeah, a bit, kind of, right? Because you read about mindfulness all the time in newspapers and magazines, and sometimes you hear them on radio or TV. And I was just wondering how they can use that as maybe a bridge towards the meditation. So.
Yeah, it seems like it's definitely like contemplation, a stepping stone.
Yeah.
And that you can't really meditate until you can, quiet the body, quiet the mind, and be able to hold an idea and crystallized and meditate on it. It said the adepts have so much of this ability that they are able to go back through their mind, their memory, and search out every thought, every word that passed through their mind, which is astonishing. And I think also another benefit of mindfulness and calmness and slowing down is that it changes our perception of time, because everyday world feels pretty rushed, from one thing to the next. And exploring the inner space of the mind changes one's experience of like time. Like Herb said, 2 minutes seems like forever. So I think in terms of the inner planes where there is really no such thing as time, it's all one moment. We experience events successively as basically HPB said, to help our minds function. Just opening up the mind to, timelessness and the huge inner space and different sense of time in the mind is good. making a habit of mindful thinking, contributes to mental and spiritual growth.
Well, I see it's
Oh,
time.
sorry.
Do I have other comments? We are.
Yeah, just the last comment, the thread of a life's meditation, the more we have these, contemplations as we strive for meditation, the more we can piece together, change the trajectory of our life's meditation so that it's focused on, union with the Supreme as opposed to like getting rich or whatever.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We will have a few minutes break and like 10 minutes. And then we'll start back on our we start on the line on the path today. It's a little book, but it's a lot in that little book. So thank you very much, and we will see you shortly.
Thank you.
Sure.